Have you ever heard of a saying that says the same hand that creates a virus often holds the antidote? So, in a remarkable twist of events, former rebel leader Risa Agbola establishes the Council of Resistance for the Republic, which is called CRR. It's an internal effort to reinstate the president, ousted President Bazoum, to restore the constitutional order amidst the military coup. So the only question we have is, who is he working for? And who is he working with? And the US is not fathoming the reality that indeed Niger is a pro-Russian state now. And again, Burkina Faso has terminated the non-double taxation treaty with France since 1967. Anyway guys, welcome back. If you're watching us for the first time, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. And don't forget to leave a comment so that we reach out to more people. So the French government has threatened Niger with a ban on aid. I think it has already done it. Niger has responded by saying, we don't want your money. Use it to fund weight loss program for Victoria Nuland, who is the acting deputy secretary of state in the USA government. You see, this resistance is actually expressing how frustrated the Africans are when it comes to foreign interference, especially from USA and France. So we see European countries having to report disruptions and suspended flights across the African continent after Nigeria's military government closed its airspace on Sunday. And they're doing it to keep their country intact, because the more you open your airspace, there is risk of interference. So the military government is pressing for a response from the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, after ignoring the deadline of reinstating the country's ousted president, Mohamed Bazoum. So it's either they have a threat of military intervention, or they're going to just shut their borders so that they don't have any other interferences. So for those who still doubt that there is a slow and painful process for France losing all its grip on its colonies, we have to follow events particularly. So in a concerning turn of events, the ousted president of Niger, Mohamed Bazoum, and his family have been held captive for 2 weeks by military junta that seized power on the 26th of July. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken calls for their immediate release. He calls for their immediate release. That's exactly the words that they use, but the real words are they demand their immediate release. So the question is, where is Niger's sovereignty to deal with their own things? In USA, there is persecution of Trump right now happening. No one is calling off the USA for what's happening. No one is even saying anything in Africa. We're just seeing the turns of events happening in America, and no one is commenting on it because it's none of Africa's business, because USA is a sovereign state. They have to do what they want because it's their country. These are internal problems, and so are the events that are happening in Niger, except that Niger is literally a former colony now that the people have taken over their own country. As Niger's military coup unfolds, humanitarian efforts by United Nations are being disrupted. The closure of borders and airspace threatens crucial supplies of medicine and food, leaving UN agencies scrambling to replenish depleting stocks. I'm always saying this over and over again. Africa needs to know where to stand, because the moment we can't provide our own medication, the moment we can't provide our own information to the people, our media is biased. Our media does not belong to us. We don't control our media. We don't control anything to do with Africa. Hence, we want to be equal with European countries, with Western countries. It's impossible until we learn how to establish our own things. So we are seeing regional sanctions happening. So now let's talk more on how aid works. These are the poorest nations in Africa according to their GDP. So we have Burundi, Sierra Leone, Malawi, Central African Republic, Madagascar, Somalia, South Sudan, Niger, Mozambique, Eritrea. So one might imagine that these countries are among the top recipients of Western aid. You're wrong. The main beneficiaries are in fact India, Syria, Ethiopia, Nigeria, and Afghanistan. Not one of the 5 poorest countries is amongst the top 10 recipients of Western aid. So the question is, why do we see certain countries receiving more Western aid, but they're not the poorest countries? Which then says poverty is really not the niche of Western aid. Geopolitics is. So Nigeria was one of the first countries to want to declare war and sanctions against Niger. But wait a minute, in as much as Nigeria has a large military presence in the region, it is no longer standing to even call Niger to order. It also has its own mess, disputed rigged elections and conflicts with Boko Haram. Nigeria received $702 million worth of aid from USA. And you know what they say, if you want to know who sent who, you start by slapping the messenger. Half of all the international development aid is tied, meaning that the recipient countries must use it to buy goods and services from the donor nations. It's like saying, I'm going to give you money as a businessman, and all you need to do is to give me back that money by buying from my shop. So as the USAID website used to boast, and it was deleted in 2006, the court says the principal beneficiary of America's foreign assistance programs has always been the United States. Close to 80% of US Agency for International Development's contracts and grants go directly to American firms. Aid has created new markets for American industry exports and meant hundreds of thousands of jobs for Americans. And this was long before Trump entered the White House and USAID was putting America first. So we see aid being used as a tool to control countries that do not have enough economic growth. And this is exactly the evil that Africa has always faced. The moment you start depending on external countries to develop your country, that's where things go wrong. Now Niger has decided to take its own course of history to destroy the most rampant mistake or error that happened in their history, which is to allow the continuation of colonization in 1940. Now they've decided to take course of their own history. The whole world is alarmed, and the whole world does not want to see that reality happening. So now, because Niger has decided to take over the country, it's now being cornered by 15 ECOWAS countries asking it to surrender the coup. But could it be a coincidence that they have such a stance yet failing to act on the coup? 15 countries acting so weak in dealing with one country. So diplomatic efforts have hit roadblock as coup leaders refuse to host ECOWAS delegation, citing security concerns amid public anger over economic sanctions. So you see, the real use of sanctions is really not to cripple the leaders, it's to incite the public so that the public can come and remove or topple the government. So negotiations are stalling, leaving ECOWAS leaders to convene and strategize in Nigeria. So the US highlights concerns of Russia's Wagner mercenary exploiting the instability in Niger. You know, sometimes it makes me wonder how the US tries to play victim whenever things happen like this. The whole time the US has been establishing bases in Africa, establishing bases in Niger, but they have not even at one point admitted to the fact that the whole instability happening in the Sahel region. Look at what happened in Libya, and look at now what's happening in Niger. The Nigerians have decided to not allow this to happen again. The instability is now reaching alarming rates. The country has to take its own stand against bullies. And this is where the country has to stop all these interferences. Now we're going to listen to what the US Secretary of State says as he talks about how he sees the Russian flags being shown in Niger as a paid activity.
You see people on the streets as an expression of actual support rather than people who might have been paid to show up at protests. It does seem odd to me that if your country is suffering an attempted military takeover, the idea that the first thing anyone would do is run to a store and buy a Russian flag, that strikes me as somewhat an unlikely.
What a nice world we live in these days. Anyway guys, until next time, we have to follow up this Niger story until the end. For now, peace out and bye.
Mama told me